In this lesson, we will talk about the things you should be thinking of when you are sketching and painting nature. And these should be tips and drawing fundamentals that you should practice as much as possible so that they become part of your subconscious. Let's draw together while I talk about the first tip. The first tip is a saying that I heard before from someone or somewhere, and it's this: there are no straight lines in nature. So when you're drawing, pay attention not to draw perfectly straight lines. And even curves that look straight, try to introduce some imperfections. If you cannot see the details, you don't have to draw all the details. For example, the tree trunk or the branches here are covered by the leaves, so I don't actually need to draw them. You can make adjustments to your drawing. You don't have to follow the reference photo exactly. There is a lot of leeway when it comes to drawing plants and trees and leaves and flowers. I'm going to paint this with watercolor, and usually I will start by painting with yellow because yellow is a color that is easy to dirty. So I will start with yellow and then I will use blue to mix with yellow to create green. And while painting, do make sure you leave some gaps between the washes, the pools of water or paint, because you can see light passing through the leaves. If you want to have the colors blend, you may want to use more water so that the wash can remain wet for a longer time. And when you paint the blue can blend with the yellow. This is ultramarine. The yellow that I'm using is Hansa Yellow Medium. Notice the green is kind of muted. So if you want to have a brighter or more vibrant green, use phthalo blue together with a yellow. Remember to leave the white of the paper white to create the light that is passing through the foliage or the leaves. I may want to have some little spots of colors at the edges or outside of the edges. Okay, next for the tree trunk, I'm just going to use French ultramarine and burnt sienna or brown. You can use burnt sienna or burnt umber. This mix will create a nice brown color. So this is ultramarine, and if you add a brown or earth color, you can get a nice neutral color. Is this a brown? Okay. And if you feel like the tree trunk is not dark enough, you may want to add more ultramarine. Again, try to introduce some imperfection to the straight lines. Okay, so this is not burnt sienna, it looks like permanent brown, PBR25. Anyway, the brown that you use is not that important. It's important, but it's not that important. Next, I can paint the the leaves on the ground, the grass. If you want to create sharp leaves or sharp grass, make sure you use a brush that has a sharp tip. So now that this is dry, you can paint another layer to make certain areas darker, such as the tree trunks and the branches, which in real life may look like they are just black. So for painting the tree trunk, I want to use less water so that I can have more control. You may want to use more paint and less water for that. Some of the branches are going to be behind the leaves, so you don't have to draw this continuous line. You can make the left side darker if the light source is coming from the right side. And this is what I have, a darker shade of green, and this can go above the branches. And this can blend into the tree trunk below. So once you have this, you can start to see the form of the tree. There is now more form to the tree. I may want to soften this area here because now you can see there is a sharp edge. So to soften this lighted area and the shadow area, I'm going to use this brush with clean water just to soften the edge. And this tree is going to have a shadow on the ground if there is sunlight. So the light source is coming from this direction, which means the shadow will be here on the left side. So let's just make this side darker. So there we have it, a very simple tree. This is just to get you warm up to drawing the tree trunk, having the branches split, drawing the strokes for the leaves, mixing the greens, and painting the shadow areas. Now the main subject here is the tree. So in this case, I have drawn the tree with more detail, but if this tree is in the background, if it's much smaller, you can actually just simplify this to a much smaller shape, which I will show you in the tutorials later on. The next tip is to pay attention to how branches and tree trunks overlap. When you have elements overlapping, and this applies to anything you draw, it can be buildings, people, or any subject. When you have elements overlapping, it will create this three-dimensional look. It will make your drawing look more dimensional, which is obviously going to make your drawing look better. Okay, I drew this part wrong. The end of the branch that is connected to the tree trunk should be thicker. So when you're drawing, do pay special attention to what you see instead of what you think you see. Sometimes I do make the mistake of drawing what my brain tells me to draw instead of drawing what's in front of me. You can use negative shapes or shapes within shapes to help you draw more accurately. For example, there is this branch behind. So as I draw this branch, I'm actually thinking about this triangle that's created by the branch. And as I'm drawing the branch here, I'm thinking about this shape that is created by this branch. So I'm not exactly drawing the branch, I'm drawing the shape here that's created by the branch. And when you're drawing, try not to have too many lines. When one line will do, that will make your drawing look more confident. If you have too many lines, it will affect the sketch. Sometimes what I like to do is to turn my fountain pen over this side so that I can draw thinner lines, so that I can differentiate the thinner lines from the thicker lines that I use to draw the outlines. The next tip relates to drawing trees with rings on the tree trunk, such as coconut trees. If you're drawing a coconut tree from the ground looking up, the lines near the ground will be more horizontal, but as you look up, these lines will start to curve like this. So this is something to take note of when you're drawing coconut trees. The next tip is to make sure that your tree is recognizable at a glance. So different trees have different shapes, and the shapes will make the tree look recognizable. So for example, if you're drawing coconut trees, try to study how the branches branch out and how the leaves branch out from the branches. Let's try and draw another tree and make sure you get the shape right. You can actually practice by drawing very simplified trees just by drawing the shapes. One great way to using trees and greenery is to make your subject pop out in front. So let's say I have a building here. I can actually introduce trees in the background just to make this building pop, and it's so easy. Just mix some green and paint behind the building, or paint in this case beside the building, and make sure the shape of the greenery is recognizable. If you want to have more contrast in this area, you can just create that edge just by painting something darker in the background. Maybe there is a coconut tree in the background. You can draw that with your watercolor brush. But make sure your watercolor brush has a sharp tip so that you can draw the recognizable shape. While painting the greenery, make sure to leave some white so that you can suggest the light passing through the foliage. Like what I have here versus what I have here. If the green doesn't look dark enough, you can add phthalo blue with red, a warm red, to create this darker green. And this is great for painting shadows and creating shapes. When you have a tree blocking the building in front like this, it means you don't have to draw the details behind the tree. So this can actually help you save some time. Depending on what tree this is, you may want to paint it with the same green as the background. So this is almost dry. So I want to create some contrast to separate the tree from the background. You can use two methods. You can make the tree darker, or you can make the background darker. So in this case, I may want to make the background darker. So once you make the background darker, the tree that is in front will start to pop out. Another thing I really like to do is to use Posca markers to add details, and red complements really well with green, so sometimes I like to use red to add or suggest flowers, and I can use certain colors to draw more plants to overlap the drawing that is behind. I can also use yellow just to create spots of highlights, and of course I can use white to create highlights as well.